Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. This is a project I started quite some time ago now. It was going to be, and hopefully will be, a mini workbench, something I can take onto job sites and hold things down, do all the clamping and various positioning, so I can cut and do all the various jobs that you need to do on a site without having access to all my tools and table saws and that sort of thing. And to that end, I wanted to, hold it together as accurately as possible while the glue setup, which I was going to use dowel pegs for. And, well, it kind of got shelved because, I've been working on lots of different ways of making dowel jigs to try and be as accurate as I can. Now, technically, what I could have done is make any jig and hold it in, at least reasonable positioning. And, of course, glue everything together. And at that point, I should be within a reasonable tolerance, but I don't have any way of planing this beyond a hand plane. Technically, I do have access to better equipment through a good friend of mine, but I want to try and do this on my own initially. I may end up having to resort to your plane there, Claude, but we'll just see how this goes first. So what I wanted to do is I did a bit of research. I checked on YouTube for various channels. I did run across one that kind of interested me a little bit. I mean, this is something that I've seen a number of places, but this gentleman had a really good presentation for it all, and I'll leave a link to his channel. It's Northern Works, and it wouldn't be fair for me to mention his channel without referring to the way I came across his channel, which is Start Making Woodworking, and I'll leave a link to his channel and the video I was watching. So definitely check them out. They both have really good presentation styles, which is very important. And like I said, I have seen this sort of style presented a couple of different times, and my approach here is going to be a little bit different. His is made out of wood. It was a hardwood, so it should last reasonably well, but I thought what I would do is I want to use those brass inserts because they're a lot harder. And I thought, initially at least, what I could do is just, drill a couple of holes for the guideposts, and then one for the center part where I could actually set in the brass insert, and then 20 minutes later I should have a functional jig that is clear, which is the important bit, because I want to be able to first, mark roughly where I want the holes, and then make sure everything is properly centered by seeing through this acrylic, which is the hardest acrylic I can buy. This is cast acrylic. It's 3/8 inch thick, so it's quite thick. And I thought, not a problem. I should be able to drill through this, and what I'll do is make a couple of guide pegs for those holes, depending on which thickness I had. As you can see, this is oak hardwood, and it fits nice and snugly in here, and so do the brass inserts. And I thought, well, this shouldn't be a problem at all. I just have to turn these down to the proper thickness, diameter, and be good to go. These are delrin. They're very machinable. It's a very good plastic, and I didn't think it would provide any kind of real problems. Well, unfortunately, I tried a couple of methods for drilling this. This is an end mill, so it gives me a nice flat bottom, and it's 1/2 inch, same as all the others. It's very accurate. But what I did is I first stuck it on here. This is just a jig I was using for making some filter grids, and as you can see, it wobbles way too much. So I thought maybe it was because there's a bit of flex in that, just basically wood jig for holding things in temporary place while I drill holes that don't really matter too much as far as their exact positioning goes. And, I said, okay, if what is the problem is that it is moving ever so slightly, I clamped it fully in place, leveled it all out properly, and then drilled an accurate hole and made sure I let things cool off. And unfortunately, it is still very wiggly. This is ridiculous as far as what I thought would happen, because apparently the issue here is as I'm drilling through this, it heats up the acrylic sufficiently that it expands, and I end up removing more material than necessary. So what happens is, of course, I end up with a nice wiggly hole, which is obviously nowhere near useful at all. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go to the actual template itself here, and mark out all the holes as accurately as I can, because it's not horribly important at this stage because it does self-center. I am going to just drill the holes all the way through, and then I am going to take the delrin and that larger brass piece, which unfortunately is the thinnest diameter I have, that's greater than 1/2 inch, and I'm going to turn that down and make these as snug a friction fit as possible to make sure everything fits, as accurate as it can, and without any wiggle. So that's the current plan. So as you can see here, this goes through when I'm not trying to be careful, very, very smoothly, and it is very easy to cut through this. The nice thing about cast acrylic, it is harder than regular acrylic, and it is far less prone to melting. So that is what I'm going to use, and this is the basic template. The 2 wider holes are for guides for larger pieces, and the 2 closer ones on the inside are for like for the 2x4s I'm going to be using for this particular project. And the other thing, the center hole, of course, is where the brass fitting is going to go. So I'm going to just end face these, and then I'm going to turn them down. This is delrin. You can hog off large amounts of material at a given time. It doesn't take any effort at all to machine. And like I said, if you want to get into machining any kind of plastic, this is the plastic of choice. Like I said, it's not very expensive relatively to, as far as like acrylic goes. It's not cheap either, but it is a good plastic for any kind of project where you want to alter the diameter of something like this, and you can do it any number of different ways. I'm using a lathe because I actually have one, and it is far faster and easier for me to do it this way. So I'm going to turn these down so I have a nice snug fit into those holes, and then I'm just going to pull this out, flip it around, do it on the other side, and then I'm going to trim that off. You can see here I missed off by just a little bit. It wasn't quite snug enough there, so I backed it off about 2 thou, and then actually see I can take the entire amount off all at once. Like I said, it's eminently machinable. It's a very nice plastic to work with. And I'm going to shove this on here, and as you can see, it is nice and snug. These holes don't have to be that tight, but it's snug enough to prevent this from turning all by itself, and that's more than enough. So I'm going to just turn this down a little bit more, obviously get rid of that excess there. Flip it over and do the exact same size. I don't have to do any alterations to this at all, because the lathe will obviously cut exactly the same as long as I don't take any change in the measurements there. And I'll just take that off all at once. So that's easy. That was the part that when at the beginning of this project, remember I said I was going to take, this is like 20 minutes to do. This is the reason why, because once I have that set, I can cut that off in like moments. And then I was going to be done. Like I said, it didn't work out that way, but that's fine. So anyway, I'm going to square off all those, and then I'm going to move over to the brass fitting. Brass is actually very easy to machine as well. I know a lot of people complain about it because it gives very, very fine chips, and that can get into the ways and it causes issues. But as far as machinability goes, if you got a good high-speed bit, it's perfectly easy to work with. The only thing you need to be careful about is your angle of attack, because you can end up with a bit of chattering and not necessarily a smooth a finish, but once you've done it once or twice, like I said, it's very easy to machine. And I can remove a fair amount of material at a time. I'm going to limit myself initially to about 2/100ths of an inch. It's obviously doesn't sound like that much, considering I think this is 1.25 inches, and I want to take it down to almost a 1/2 inch. Yeah, so anyway, it doesn't take long. I think this took me about 10-15 minutes to get this down to size, and like I said, it's not difficult to work with at all. That's just an initial cut. You can see it's still not even brought it up to round. Even though these things are technically round to begin with, they are extruded. So there is a variability in their overall dimensions. And once you have it down to size like this, it's very smooth and very easy to work with. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this down. And I want to also change one other thing about this. Normally, I just make the insert itself. But obviously in this case, I have a couple other factors. First off, I don't want it to hang below the bottom edge of the acrylic, so I'm just making sure that my cut leaves a little bit of a lip there, and it does. And the other thing is, when I insert this, I'm going to leave a tang on the top side of it so that it won't obviously fall in past the edge of, like I want it to set in properly and be solid. So that's the two factors here. And the other thing, of course, is I want it to fit snugly. The other brass fittings, because they are 1/2 inch, and I was drilling 1/2 inch holes, there are times when I am working with it that it is a little bit loose. It doesn't necessarily hold as tight as I like it to, and I sometimes have to hold my finger just slightly against it just so it doesn't pop out. Not a big deal, really. Mostly it's when I do the initial hole, but again, I don't want to have too much wiggle for this. And actually, after building this, after going through the process of making this, which didn't take long at all, I think this might be the way I'm going to go forward from now on. Not necessarily, I said, with using acrylic. I'm going to see how that works out. But even with doing a hardwood jig, this is going to be far more of a friction fit. I can be quite tight with it. Put a bit of bevel on the bottom, chamfered edge kind of thing, and this will be very snug, especially in wood, because I can be a little bit more aggressive with the friction fit, and I think it might be a much better way of going. And as you can see here, I am creeping up on this ever so slowly. I'm not going to show you all of it because it is the exact same process with the delrin, just a little bit slower. I'm only taking off 1/1000th on the radius, so 2 thou at a time until I caught up to where I needed to go. Use the center drill to put the initial hole, because I want this to be dead center. And then this is the actual drill bit size for the fitting itself, and all I did is part that off, flip it over. It makes a nice fitting in the end. This is what it's going to be, and I am going to snug that in. As you can see, it fits nice and snugly. I could put it down all the way. I didn't. Just like I said, this is just for the video purposes here. This is now, as I turn this on its edge, it's going to, as you turn it sideways, you see it centers perfectly, which is the important bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spend some time, and I'm going to put a small dot in the very center of this board. It doesn't matter for lengthwise. I can cut lengthwise easily and trim off. It is the width that matters. And as you can see, as we go over this here, it is nice and centered, which is perfect. Thanks for watching. Leave comments. Let me know what you think about this, whether you think being clear is important or not, and I'll see you in the next video. And bye for now.